G'day everyone and welcome back to Home Drive-In and welcome back to another episode of Take 10. Gentlemen, step aside. The ladies are ruling this list. Today we celebrate those women who have made their mark in the horror genre. And just remember, if you are enjoying these videos guys, please feel free to give me a like, share and a subscribe just to help me grow this channel. And I'll love you forever. Representation of women in the horror genre has often been the source of scrutiny throughout film history, especially considering the early slasher subgenre where, admittedly, the ladies were often subject to a handful of tropes and archetypes. Nonetheless, there have still been many horror films past and particularly present that have thankfully sought to defy outdated traditions. This video is in no way an analysis of gender representation in any way, but simply a celebration of horror films that predominantly feature women in roles of good, evil, and everything in between. The one stipulation is we are talking living humans with human motives, so ghosts, alien queens, and yes, not even teenage werewolves will be included. Sorry, Ginger.
Fuck you.
So with that, I give you 10 horror movies with a female hero and villain. I will be discussing major plot revelations, even from more recent films, so there will be an abundance of spoilers here. There are chapters provided, so feel free to skip to those films you've already seen if you don't want the others ruined for you. Or even better, just watch the whole thing if spoilers don't bother you. Let's begin. Number 10. Kelly, Frances and Terry. The Initiation. Here's one you may not remember, a mid-80s slasher flick featuring a pre-Spaceballs Daphne Zuniga in one of her earliest film roles. More densely plotted than you'd expect for a 1980s slasher film, about Kelly Fairchild, a student who becomes entangled in a murder mystery while she and her college pals prepare for their sorority initiation ritual. With no memory of her childhood before the age of 9, Kelly seems to be repressing some past trauma with a recurring nightmare about a man burning alive. While word gets around about a breakout from a nearby psychiatric facility, Kelly and her friends take part in their initiation by infiltrating her father's department store late at night. Soon, however, she and her friends are stalked by an unseen killer. A final revelation reveals that Kelly has a disturbed twin sister Terry, also played by Zuniga, who escaped from the aforementioned facility. It turns out the girls come from quite a checkered past, with her mother and her lover Dwight covering up an altercation that resulted in the burning and disfigurement of their real father Jason once he had discovered their affair. Terry was ultimately institutionalized following the incident, with Kelly's amnesia meaning she had no memory of her sister, and was brought up to believe that Dwight was her actual father.
Everybody got that?
While being an unevenly acted little slasher, the film gets props not only for its admittedly intriguing plot, but also for featuring a post-psycho Vera Miles as Kelly and Terry's mother Frances. While the murderous Terry is the clear antagonist, Frances is no saint either. Despite somewhat redeeming herself by ultimately doing away with her psychotic daughter, she still leaves poor Kelly in shock and herself with some serious explaining to do.
It's time to go, Mrs. Fairchild.
Gotcha. I must say, Natalie, you have proved your friendship to me.
Number 9. Natalie and Brenda. Urban Legend. The late 90s slasher resurgence gave us some stingers and some gems, and this decent little horror flick was one of a string of imitations born from the hype following a little movie called Scream. With a college setting, check. A disguised killer, check. Cameos from legendary horror veterans, check, check, and check. The film concerns a hooded killer picking off students at a New England college in methods based on that of popular urban legends. Jared Leto may well receive top billing as her love interest Paul, but Alicia Witt as Natalie is undeniably the true protagonist of the film, who finds herself a target after several of her friends are killed. And since every slasher film in the 90s needed a shocking revelation, we learn that her so-called best friend Brenda was behind the slayings all along. Brenda harboured a grudge against Natalie, who had taken part in a prank based on, you guessed it, a popular urban legend, which ultimately backfired, resulting in the death of Brenda's boyfriend. Rebecca Gayheart hams it up in the final scene as she delivers the obligatory Scream-inspired speech in which she attempts to justify her actions. Meanwhile, Alicia Witt, who received a Saturn Award nomination for her performance, does well as our final girl, and with, albeit a little help from Paul, successfully does away with her nemesis. Or does she?
You killed me. What?
Number 8. Tree and Laurie. Happy Death Day. Poor Tree has been having a rough day, repeatedly, in this horror comedy homage to Groundhog Day, which sees a young college student stuck in a time loop, reliving a not-so-happy birthday over and over. Reliving a not-so-happy birthday over and over. Sorry, I couldn't resist. The kicker, however, is right before each day resets, she is viciously slaughtered by a killer in a baby mask that seems to be holding a personal grudge against our time looper. It is deduced, with the help of love interest Carter and some rather convenient exposition, that the only way to close the loop is to discover who the murderous culprit is. In a final shocking reveal, it turns out that Tree's otherwise mild-mannered roommate was behind the killings all along for reasons.
You've been killing me over some stupid guy?
The movie is fun with more emphasis on comedy than horror, with Jessica Roth thoroughly entertaining as the flawed but likeable Tree, who carries the film almost single-handedly. Meanwhile, Ruby Modine as her bitter roommate entertains with her ultimate villain reveal, played firmly tongue-in-cheek in light of how delightfully ludicrous the whole premise is.
Oh, that's not the only reason. You're a dumb bitch, too!
Number 7. Alex and Marie. High Tension. Okay, say what you like about the twist ending of this 2003 French gore fest, which was polarising for many viewers, but for me, I'm a sucker for a twist ending no matter how far-fetched. Within reason. When Alex brings her best friend Marie to her parents' house for the weekend, they soon find themselves victim to a horrific home invasion perpetrated by a thuggish truck driver. As Marie fights tooth and nail to survive and save her best friend, she eventually finds herself in hot pursuit of the now kidnapped Alex and her abductor. After a terrifying confrontation at a gas station, the police and we the audience discover a shocking if somewhat questionable truth. Yes, Marie had been the killer all along, obsessed with her best friend, which was hinted at for the more observant viewer, with the truck driver nothing more than a figment of her deluded imagination. High Tension was one of many French horror films to emerge in the 21st century, which, like Raw and Martyrs, features a predominantly female cast, delivering enough style and graphic violence to distract us from how implausible it ultimately is.
I saw what you did in the barn. You deviant little whore.
Number 6. Maxine and Pearl. X. Now, nothing could go wrong in a mid-70s Texas farmhouse when a group of adult filmmakers venture out to a rented cabin to film their latest masterpiece. Could it? Well, not surprisingly, yes it could, as the group soon learns when they are stalked and slaughtered by their neighbouring landlords, Howard and Pearl, an elderly couple who cotton on to the group's rather sordid activities. The last girl standing is the free-spirited Maxine, an adult film star played by Mia Goth, who has caught the eye of Pearl, also played by Mia Goth in some impressive makeup and prosthetics. Pearl seems somewhat drawn to Maxine, which, when taken in even greater context alongside the film's excellent prequel, Pearl, the movie's themes of lost youth and unfulfilled desires reveal themselves. This 2022 film by Ty West draws inspiration from such classics as the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Psycho, yet appears to echo themes of Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, which also presents its villain as both frightening and sympathetic. While her husband Howard is a willing accessory to her murderous tendencies, Pearl violently directs her repression on the filmmakers until finally confronted by Maxine, who flaunts the youth and liberation she so desperately wanted.
You end up just like me. I'm nothing like you. I'm a fucking star!
You took your family for granted.
What do you mean?
What are you going to do? Hit me?
Number 5. Kate and Esther, orphan. Still grieving from the stillbirth of their third child, parents Kate and John decide to adopt 9-year-old Esther, a young girl from Russia who seems to have a talent and wisdom far beyond her years. Soon, however, we discover, as the tagline says, there's something wrong with Esther, as she starts to exhibit violent tendencies, from killing birds to injuring classmates, even going so far as to terrorize her new siblings. Her behaviour does not go unnoticed by her new mother Kate, played by modern horror scream queen Vera Farmiga. Kate wises up to Esther's tendencies seemingly before her husband, who dismisses her concerns, attributing her previous alcoholism to her apparent delusions. However, in a truly unique twist, and just really driving home that spoiler warning, we learn that Esther is in fact an adult serial killer who suffers from a unique type of dwarfism. Having escaped a mental institution, Esther is in fact Lena Klammer, a woman in her early 30s who uses her childlike appearance to infiltrate families and commit several murders. One can certainly sympathise with Kate, whose anxiety over Esther and those who disbelieve her drive her to near breaking point. However, it's 11-year-old Isabelle Fuhrman who steals the show as the homicidal titular orphan, who, despite actually being a child, once the truth is known, still manages to convince us she is a grown serial killer with a taste for murder.
Don't let me die, Mommy.
I'm not your fucking mommy!
Number 4. Sidney and Mrs. Loomis, Scream 2. Without giving away anything unnecessarily, yes, there may well have been other options in this franchise, but the First Lady of Scream villains is, in my humble opinion, still the one to beat. Sidney Prescott, having survived the massacre in the first film, now resides at Windsor College, where another killing spree soon begins. Many chases, killings and phone calls later, the mother of serial killer Billy Loomis from the first film emerges, having masqueraded as a nosy reporter Debbie Salt with the apparently rational motive of avenging the death of her son at the hands of Sidney. Loomis's actual body count is relatively low, leaving most of the legwork to co-conspirator Mickey Altieri, despite being the true mastermind behind this latest killing spree. Like mother, like son. She also earns special props for personally bringing an albeit polarising end to franchise favourite Randy Meeks. The genius casting of Laurie Metcalf, who, like Courtney Cox and Neve Campbell, had been a household name on television, cleverly misdirecting us since we had grown accustomed to TV stars in this film series playing the hero. And of course, Neve Campbell's Sidney is tough as nails, as she once again faces down 2 diabolical killers. And while Cotton Weary may well have dealt the fatal blow, Sidney quite obviously learned from her ordeal in the first film and took no chances.
Just in case.
Did you know that a young boy drowned the year before those 2 others were killed? The counselors weren't paying any attention. His name was Jason.
Number 3. Alice and Mrs. Voorhees, Friday the 13th. Oh, come on, you all knew this was coming. Forgive the predictability, but you don't go discussing female horror characters without the quote-unquote Friday girls and, of course, Jason's mother. While the film tries to emulate Psycho's misdirection by introducing Annie as a potential final girl, she is in fact killed off in the first act, when we're then introduced to Alice, who emerges as our protagonist. I assume you all know the story, but just a quick rehash. Camp Crystal Lake is being reopened after many decades following the accidental drowning of a young boy and the murder of 2 randy teens. However, one by one, the newly hired counsellors begin to die in a grisly fashion, until Alice finds herself the sole survivor. While all the killings happen by an unseen assailant, it isn't until the film's final act that Mrs. Voorhees is revealed to the audience, seeking revenge for the negligence that resulted in the supposed drowning of her son Jason. When she and Alice finally face off, they become cemented in horror film lore for inadvertently being responsible for starting an entire franchise, with Jason taking the reins in nearly every sequel. Like mother, like son. again. While not Oscar material, both performers give it their all, with Betsy Palmer, who quite famously hated the script, taking the role as she needed a new car, but still wound up delivering an iconic screen villain that is certainly one for the ages.
Come, dear. It'll be easier for you than it was for Jason.
You wouldn't be able to do these awful things to me if I weren't still in this chair. But you are, Blanche. You are in that chair.
Number 2. Blanche and Jane. Whatever happened to baby Jane? Okay, there is a revelation in this film that somewhat blurs the distinction between victim and villain in this 60s classic about the tragedy of two aging sisters dealing with anger and repression at the end of their respective acting careers. Baby Jane Hudson revels in her career as a spoiled child star, while Sister Blanche watches from the sidelines. Yet, as the years pass, the tables turn, with Jane's career washing up as Blanche emerges as a successful actress. After being seemingly crippled by an intoxicated Jane in a car accident, Blanche finds herself wheelchair-bound and under the care of her alcoholic sister, who takes delight in venting her bitterness against Blanche by mercilessly tormenting her. While Blanche is deserving of sympathy for her predicament, Jane is also presented as a deeply tragic figure. Delusional, she also makes a fruitless attempt to revive her lost career. While masquerading as a horror film, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane effectively explores the tragedy of two sisters upon which jealousy and guilt have dominated their relationship. While the off-camera rivalry between the two leads is well known, their antagonism towards one another only serves their performances here. While Joan Crawford is, as always, exceptional, Bette Davis is an absolute scene stealer in this Oscar-nominated role that she appears to be relishing every moment of. Number 1. Virtually anyone. Carrie. You could nominate any one of the lovely ladies as either true hero or villain in Brian De Palma's adaptation of Stephen King's novel, and chances are you'd be right. Carrie White is a put-upon teenager who lives at home with her overbearing and deeply religious mother. She is also relentlessly bullied by her peers, while at the same time discovers her developing powers of telekinesis. One could nominate Sue Snell as a remorseful hero to Carrie, who sacrifices her prom by delegating her boyfriend to take Carrie instead. Or teacher Miss Collins, who acts as a rock for Carrie amid her hardships at school. On the other hand, we have the devilish Chris Hargensen, who orchestrates the now infamous wicked plan to humiliate Carrie on the night of the prom. However, the central rivalry undoubtedly lies between Carrie and her devoutly religious mother Margaret, who is generally regarded as the true villain of the film. The turbulent relationship between Carrie and her mother plays centre stage, with both Sissy Spacek and Piper Laurie being nominated for Academy Awards for their respective performances. However, one could make the argument that Carrie White herself is both hero and villain. Her final act of vengeance does extend to innocent characters in a finale that is as grandiose as it is frightening. Nonetheless, Carrie is our protagonist, and the film does an expert job of making us sympathise with her until the very bitter end. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. Have you got any female-dominated horror flicks that you want to share with me? These were just my picks, so feel free to leave me a comment and let me know what your favourites are. And if you want to do the whole like, share, subscribe thing while you're down there, that would be awesome. I will be back soon with a new retrospective, yet until then, be good to yourselves and each other. I'll see you next time.